All right, I think we're live, man. Push one in the chat if you can hear me. All right, got the confirmation. Thank you for the confirmation, man. Welcome back to the Black Brain Trusters, episode 562. Black Geopolitics, please hit the like button as you come in, share the video if possible, hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, including those posted on the community tab. There's a doc in the description, mute the video for you to follow along with. If you want to engage in this discussion, there'll be a link in the chat for you to click on. When you click on the link, make sure you raise your hand so that one of us can acknowledge you and advance you to the panel. Let me drop the link for you all. Before you join the panel, make sure you update your Zoom app. There is a new Zoom update that is out. So make sure you take care of that before you join the panel. 5.1.0 is the latest update, so make sure you have that. All right, man, let me get started. We're already late. So first item on the docket is from WUSA9.com. Feds, company provided subpar steel for Navy submarine hulls. The company provides steel castings made at a foundry in Tacoma, Washington, that are used to make submarine hulls. For decades, the Navy's leading supplier of high-strength steel for submarine provided subpar metal because of one of the company's longtime employees falsified lab results, putting sailors at greater risk in the event of collisions or other impacts, federal prosecutors said in court filings Monday. The supplier, Kansas City-based Bradken Inc., paid $10.9 million as part of a deferred prosecution agreement, the Justice Department said. The company provides steel castings that Navy contractors Electric Boat and Newport News shipbuilding used to make submarine hulls. Bradken in 2008 acquired a foundry in Tacoma, Washington that produced steel castings for the Navy. According to federal prosecutors, Bradken learned in 2017 that the foundry's director of metallurgy had been falsifying the results of strength tests, indicating that the steel was strong enough to meet the Navy's requirement when in fact it was not. The company initially disclosed its findings to the Navy, but then wrongfully suggested that the discrepancies were not the result of fraud that hindered the Navy's investigation into the scope of the problem, as well as its efforts to remediate the risk to its sailors, prosecutors said. Bradken placed the Navy sailors and its operations at risk. Seattle U.S. Attorney Brian Moran said in a news release, government contractors must not tolerate fraud within their organizations, and they must be fully forthcoming with the government when they discover it. There is no allegation in the court documents that any submarine parts failed, but Moran said the Navy had incurred increased costs and maintenance to ensure that the subs remained seaworthy. The government did not disclose which subs were affected. The Foundry's director of metallurgy, Elaine Thomas, 66, of Auburn, Washington, also was charged criminally with one count of major fraud against the United States. Thomas, who worked in various capacities at the lab for 40 years, was due to make an initial appearance in the federal court June 30th. Her attorney, John Carpenter, declined to comment. So you got you got the U.S. military running around underwater with who knows how many submarines, been affected by this. Subpar metal inside your fast attack submarines and whatnot. You're more likely to probably have that metal decay and collapse on itself underwater than you would probably to run into a Russian submarine or a Chinese submarine and be taken down. This is bad. This is really bad. Okay. This is just as bad as the Chinese getting the documentation, okay, on all U.S. submarines that are floating around in the ocean right now. We don't know how many submarines were made with this. Okay, the U.S. Navy probably has about 30 submarines, man, diesel, electric, and nuclear. We don't know how many of these submarines were produced with this poor quality metal. Okay, still, we don't know. You may see the same thing with aircraft carriers. That's probably why the aircraft carriers aren't working. Okay. Okay. This is bad stuff. I mean, it just doesn't seem to stop for the U.S. Military, man. F-35s that can't perform at high performance. Okay. Aircraft carriers that don't have functional elevators and stuff like that to lift up their armaments. Tanks that, are stalling on the battlefield from what I heard. I don't know, everybody's trying to stay within the industrial complex, but what they're starting to see now is that this is just about a quick grab for the buck, and putting out these submarines, talking about going to war. Who are you going to go to war with if you're your tin foil submarine falls apart, man, under pressure. You hit a few rocks, even if you run into another animal or something like that, man, big. It's a high probability that you may dent some of that metal, and you may end up having some more issues. Okay. Everybody's cutting corners, man. Everybody's cutting corners. Okay, Boeing, 737s falling out of the sky. America's industrial complex is just not. It's not standing up to under the light of scrutiny. Okay. MOT, if you're trying to get back on, the link is in the chat. I'm not sure what happened. I did advance you to the panel, so I'm not sure what happened. Yeah, hit the like button, man. There's 40 people in here watching, only 20 likes. Hit the like button. All right, let me jump to the next item on the docket unless somebody else wants to jump on and talk about the previous item. All right, this is from Yahoo News. China keeps flying its Su-30 fighters over Taiwan, but how do they stack up? This should be interesting. I'm not going to read this whole thing. Chinese Su-30 fighters entered the southwestern airspace of Taiwan in early June as part of a rather transparent, deliberate warning to the U.S. and Taiwan that China was ready to attack if needed. These flights, sorry, hold on a second. All right, let me start over. Chinese Su-30 fighters entered the southwestern airspace of Taiwan in early June as part of a rather transparent, deliberate warning to the U.S. and Taiwan that China was ready to attack if needed. The flights, as described in a report from the Global Times, were sent as a message following continued military-to-military cooperation between the U.S. and Taiwan. U.S. transport aircraft flight over Taiwan and the passage of a U.S. destroyer through the Taiwan Straits. The People's Liberation Army Su-30 fighter jets flew over Taiwan just one day after a U.S. military aircraft flew over the island too, as Chinese officials reportedly told the Global Times, counter the proactive move by the U.S. Military aircraft. The Su-30s are Russian-built fighters in service with the PLA since the early 2000s. It's described as having a long endurance, advanced passive electronically scanned array radar systems, infrared search and track, a reconnaissance pod, targeting sensors, and medium-range air-to-air missiles. Interestingly, some have likened the Su-30 to the U.S. F-15, despite the fact that the Su-30 emerged roughly 15 years later. Despite its 1980s origins, there are many reasons why today's upgraded F-15 may in fact be equivalent, if not superior, to the more modern Su-30s. While the original F-15 airframe may have emerged from the 1980s, the 2020 U.S. F-15 is essentially an entirely new plane. The Air Force currently operates roughly 400 F-15C, D, and E variants and plans to keep the aircraft flying into the 2040s. In recent years, the F-15 has been in the process of receiving new weapons, electronic warfare systems, infrared search and track, radar, and high-speed computing technology to massively improve the performance characteristics of the aircraft. Upgraded F-15 are in the process of operating with active electronically scanned array radar in an electronic warfare system.
Home. I'm a man of simple means.
Oh, you have Xfinity X1.
I got my live TV, DVR, even my streaming apps like.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, man. These pop-up ads come up in other areas, man. It kind of threw me off. Yeah, but basically, the F-15 and the Su-30 are supposed to be one in competing categories of aircraft. And so what I'm seeing here is that people always want to compare, Western technology to, technology outside of the hemisphere. It doesn't matter if the F-15 is on paper a better plane. It depends on the pilot. Okay, they proved this a few years ago with the MiG-21 that was built in the 1960s, and compared it to a F-15 today. And the MiG-21 with a very experienced pilot was just as good as the F-15 with an inexperienced pilot. Okay, so that's the sort of perspective that's being had here.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. Because I remember when they were talking a lot about fighter weapons school, and you were talking about Top Gun and all that. You remember that back in the mid '80s, and going into the early '90s. You had pilots who would come into those schools, and they were flying the more advanced let's say F-14 or whatever. And I think, and then you have William Tell, which actually is a fighter weapon school for the Air Force, and pilots. You had the experienced pilots were readily waxing the less experienced pilots who were students. The teachers were waxing them on a regular consistent basis in relatively inferior aircraft. They were beating them. They were beating them regularly, and that was shown routinely. So it definitely comes down to the pilot. It certainly is great to have a great aircraft underneath you and really can perform well. But if you've got another pilot who's got a much better skills than you have, that's just going to be more of a very expensive, $30 or $40 or $50 million coffin you're going to be in.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Yeah, because the Su-30 is 1/3 the cost of a F-15 anyways. So yeah, you're right. If the U.S. takes a loss on one of those, that's a big hit. If the Chinese takes a hit on one of those, they have plenty to reproduce. So, Black Torch in the chat says Chinese tech is stolen Western tech. Not necessarily.
Yeah, not necessarily.
Not necessarily. This is from Russia. So they didn't steal anything from this.
Or the Sukhoi 37, which does a Cobra maneuver and all that kind of stuff. Vectored thrust technologies that has this thing spinning around in a circle and doing crazy stuff, which I think in a dogfight, a 1v1 dogfight against maybe with a highly experienced pilot, with someone in an F-15, which is a good dogfighter, or certainly an F-22. I think that a very highly experienced pilot that's flying that Sukhoi 37 might have the capability of waxing what we have out there right now. It's a possibility, because that plane can do incredible things, and if you're highly experienced in that aircraft, you've got huge advantages.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing about the U.S. fighter jets is that they have a lot of features. When you look at something like an F-35, although it's supposed to be the 5th generation untouchable sort of fighter plane, man, it can't stay at full speed, man. It can't really keep up with its own performance metrics. And so on paper, it looks good, but in reality, it's never been in a dogfight. And I don't even think you can get into a dogfight nowadays with 4th and 5th generation fighter jets. I think those days are over. Okay. The last dogfight that was had in the air recently was between Pakistan and India. And Pakistan shot down their MiG-21s out of the sky. And so I think the days of dogfighting are over, especially with air-to-air missiles that can see you from 5 and 10 miles away. I don't think they'll be ever getting back into dogfights anymore. But if you plan on invading someone's airspace, man.
Mike, I would have to challenge that, because that was the talking back in the late 60s, early 70s. Nah, man, the days of dogfighting are over. They've been heralding the days of dogfighting to be over for 50 years now. Okay. Over 50 years. And that has not been the case. Which they have found is that through stealth technology, a lot of other technologies that are being used, next thing you know, they find planes getting close up to each other when they shouldn't. But next thing you know, there they are. And now you're in a dogfight. Now you're a few thousand feet between each other, and now one's closing in. At a high energy level. Now you got to avoid, and now you're in a fight. I mean, so dogfighting can come up at any point in time. So I think as long as there are aircraft in the air lurking and dipping around, the possibility of a dogfight always exists. So I think dogfighting skills are never going to go out of style. I don't think they. This has been predicted for a long time, and we have not seen that come to pass as of yet.
Yeah, but that's in the event that you don't have surface-to-air missiles. you would be hard pressed to go into somewhere like Russia where they have S-400, S-300, S-500, Buk M3. All of those surface air missile systems are used to track anything that's in the sky the size of a softball. I don't know if you would be able to get into their space and have a dogfight with their planes. I think you'll probably lose going in there.
That might be the case, but if you have pods that are able to you know eject and make these sidewinders react to them and take the missiles off off your line and then run into these decoys and stuff like that they have. It's a possibility. It all depends on the anti the countermeasures that these planes might have to deal with that. And if you're going to be dealing with all the sidewinders and so forth, they're going to be countermeasures on these aircrafts as well to fool the sidewinders. These new sidewinders today are very, very, very sophisticated, but they still can be fooled. And there's no such thing as a 100% non-foolable system that doesn't exist. So they may have these on these planes that can do that. And if they are able to do that, next thing you know, you get past a few of them, and now you're able to do a bombing run. Now all of a sudden you got to deploy, your aircraft to get this guy out of the skies who might be, getting real froggy in your area, and this might be a highly skilled pilot who's doing this, and you may encounter that. You might encounter that. To say that this cannot exist or is over, I would not be quick to I wouldn't be quick to say that. I wouldn't be quick to say that. It's a possibility that could happen, and then now you're dogfighting, and I think every pilot has to be. If you're in the Air Force or you're in the Naval Air Forces and so forth, you're going to have to be prepared for some of that. You should have an aircraft that is capable to be exceedingly maneuverable, naturally unstable, and be able to fly slowly. And be able to avoid another pilot with high maneuverability at a very slow speed to avoid certain kind of things, and put yourself in a position in which you can dogfight and get out of there quickly as well. So there's a lot to it, but I do believe that dogfighting will be a part of the of the air combat arena for the foreseeable future. That's what I think. Until you start putting drones in the skies, and I think drones will have to have some dogfighting ability as well, in order for them not to get shot out of the skies and deliver their missions as well. So
you can't outrun a hypersonic missile.
I believe we have hypersonic aircraft. They talk about that there is this Aurora, which I have a friend who's in the military. Well, he's out now, who's in the Air Force.
If you can't manage an F-35, how do you build the confidence to say that this other Aurora, we got this in our back pocket? I don't know if the U.S. military really has something that's sufficient to avoid a hypersonic missile. I don't think.
Well, I'm going to say this: the X-15 experimental aircraft that was flown in 1953 achieved the speed of Mach 6, Mach 7. During that period, it was basically a rocket, with a pilot sitting on top of it. But it was able to achieve these hypersonic speeds in 1953, 1953, Mach 6. It might astound us what we have today that we don't know about.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I stepped away for a second.
Yeah, so that's all I'm saying. Done.
All right. Let me go to the next item on the docket from Reuters. NATO must deal with, not ignore Turkish problem, French official. NATO must not bury its head in the sand with regard to Turkey's recent behavior towards its allies. A French defense ministry official said on Wednesday, accusing the Turkish Navy of harassing a French warship on a NATO mission. Imagine that. A senior Turkish official denied the accusation, saying no such thing had occurred. NATO defense ministers will hold a virtual meeting this week amid growing tensions between Paris and Ankara. The two allies have traded barbs over the crisis in Libya, accusing each other of supporting opposing sides in the country's war. Speaking ahead of the meeting, the French Defense Ministry official said it was time NATO had a frank discussion about Turkey and its conduct, not just in Libya, but other issues such as Ankara buying Russian S-400 defense systems and blocking NATO defense planning for the Baltics and Poland. We have known complicated moments in the alliance, but we can't be an ostrich and can't pretend there isn't a Turkey problem at NATO. We have to see it, say it, and handle it, said the official, calling Turkey's behavior unacceptable. The official singled out Turkey's role in Libya. Turkey, which backs the internationally recognized government in Tripoli, has secured a foothold in Libya by helping to repel an assault on the capital by the Libyan National Army, LNA, of Eastern Commander Khalifa Haftar, who is backed by the United Arab Emirates, or Emiratis, Egypt, and Russia. The French official said Turkey's decision to send more weapons and Syrian mercenaries into the country was doing nothing to achieve peace and in fact, pushing Russia to increase its involvement. He accused the Turkish Navy of using their NATO call signals while accompanying Turkish vessels suspected of breaking a UN arms embargo to deliver weapons to Libya. So, the purpose of NATO, man, is supposed to be this North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's supposed to deal with the Soviet Union and post-Soviet Union and Russia. It's not doing anything what it was intended out to do. And so I don't know. If NATO partners, NATO members are going to go to war with each other, there's no point in having NATO. What's the point?
Well, NATO members have gone to war before. We had Greece and Turkey actually have a conflict back in what was that, 1974? The Cyprus War, the war in Cyprus. These were two NATO based countries, and it went down. It went down. So this is nothing new. We've seen this before in history. I know many people may not be aware of that war, but it did happen. I suspect we may see more of this as pressures increase for countries to be sufficient. I mean, to be able to take care of themselves, and they're going to start cutting their own deals, and we're going to see China and these guys getting involved, and it's going to be a lot of stuff going down. So I suspect we're going to see a lot more of this for countries, their own survival. So yeah, I think NATO has been problematic, or has had issues almost from its inception. But I think we're going to be watching its end soon. And when I say soon, in the relative short term as opposed to relative long term. But we have seen wars between NATO nations previously.
Yeah, I think the Cyprus issue kind of predates NATO in a way that they had already been fighting over these territories in the beginning, before NATO was even thought of. So I think that's bound to happen, regardless if they were in NATO or not. But when you have France, which is a part of,
go ahead, Michael. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But when you have France, which is a part of the Security Council, being harassed by Turkey, who like the article is saying, Turkey has been kind of rogue in the last few years. You have to question what's the point of them even really being there. The only reason I can imagine that they're being is because the U.S. needs them to be there because of their geographical position. But outside of that, they're not really friends, in terms of like Greece and Turkey and the French and Turkey. They're not really friends like that. And so even Germany took back their weapons out of Turkey a few years ago. So they saw the writing on the wall as well. Get away from Turkey.
Yeah, I mean, they've seen those issues. Turkey also with Russia and so forth, and not that Russia has anything to do with NATO, but Turkey has been somewhat aggressive or been an issue around for a while. And like I said, the Cyprus War with Greece in 70, in the earlier 70s, 74, that war, and now with Turkey, Turkey and France, these guys haven't gotten along either. Mm-hmm. So here we're looking at one of the major protagonists, Turkey, involved. That's a NATO country with two different NATO nations, and there have been threats between other NATO nations before. Things may not have. They didn't jump off, but they've been threats. So there have been issues. NATO was supposed to be there to see to it that these things didn't happen, but still they did. So I don't know. Like I said, I think NATO. I've been saying NATO should be done a while ago, unfortunately, but because it really is nothing more than an arm of the United States military, to be a large extent a part of our hegemony, and I think that's going to, as that starts to wane in certain respects with other powers coming about, NATO is going to seem to be a little less practical. So I think its days are numbered, and people have been speaking about the numbered days of NATO for quite a while now.
All right. Next is from the WashingtonPost.com. In a letter, Pentagon leaders outline military role in recent unrest. National Guard troops remain in supporting role during recent civil unrest in Washington, and steps to prepare active duty forces to deploy into the nation's capital proved to be a precautionary measure. Defense Secretary Mark T. Esper and General Mark A. Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said in a letter to Congress on Wednesday. The Pentagon leaders addressed questions from Rep. Adam Smith, chairman of the House of Armed Service Committee, in a letter Wednesday, a copy which was obtained by the Washington Post, conveniently. The letter comes amid a showdown between the Pentagon leadership and the Democrats on the committee, who are pushing Esper and Milley to testify about the military's role in responding to recent unrest triggered by the killing of George Floyd, a Black man who died in police custody last month in Minnesota, and other instances of police brutality against African Americans. It followed a scathing letter that Smith sent earlier in the day to Esper, expressing his profound frustration that the Pentagon had not met a committee-imposed deadline to provide written answers to the questions about Defense Department actions, as thousands of law enforcement officials and the National Guard fanned out across Washington. Pentagon leaders have come under intense scrutiny over the past week for appearing to back President Trump's militarized response, including when they were seen in a photo op the president held near the White House on June 1st, shortly after protesters were forcibly cleared from the area. Military leaders also publicly chided Esper, Trump's second defense secretary, for describing a need to dominate the battle space in reference to cities experiencing unrest. Jonathan Hoffman, the chief Pentagon spokesman, said in a statement earlier in the day that the department is bound for a civil war, especially in this country where the whole country is awash with millions of guns. A shooting war would be not only would it cost Trump, the election in November, it would destroy the Republican Party forever. They would never be able to recover from something like that. Everybody will always know the Republican Party as the party that launched on civilians. That would be a disaster. And so I think that I think everybody's playing this cool in terms of going out there and actually putting, boots on the ground, and so to speak. And Trump looking at this and saying, I'm the president of law and order, and I'll send the military into your state and do this, and that. You're talking about a civil war, man. The very thing that you're sanctioning Bashar al-Assad for in Syria, in Venezuela for, that's the very thing you're going to do to your citizens too. Except the war, instead of the unrest being in other countries, is actually coming to your doorstep, and you don't know what to do about it, and other than to use a hammer against them. But when everybody else decides that they want to use a hammer against real terrorists, you got a problem with that. And so, I don't know. I don't know what Trump was thinking. Somebody put the bug in the air and said you should do this, and he probably went out there and said, "That's a good idea." He went out there and did it, and it didn't work out too well for him. So.
Yeah, I think that'd be a very disastrous move, and what's going on now he would only accelerate things, so that would be exceedingly problematic for him. And I agree. I think the Republican Party would. I pretty much think the Republican Party has taken some huge hits just by the fact that this man got into office and he decimated their dais of candidates. Mm-hmm. But I think this would be very destructive, very, very destructive to him if he did such a poor move. If he did.
Yeah, absolutely. David Monroe in the chat says, "Oh my God," in his white girl voice, "Why do you all think civil war is bad for Trump or conservatives? If we have an actual civil war, Trump now becomes a war president for his side, and there will be no election to replace him." Yeah, but you don't have a country at that point. You don't have a country at that point.
Tell them to study the Civil War. Go study the Civil War when we had that conflict, based on slavery. Mm-hmm. Take a look at that war, that conflict, and what the state of your country was at that period, and the states that seceded and the ones that stayed, and see if you had a country at that stage. Your country had to be re-annealed by a winner of that war. A winner of that war had to determine. Had the South won, of which they were never going to win, but had they won, you would have another nation. And that didn't happen. So that's what we're looking at. But I don't think people really quite understand what they mean by civil war. They don't understand what that fully means. But I would say study that conflict, or study the civil wars of that we've seen around in the 20th century, China, so forth. Take a look at some of those conflicts, and then get a good idea of what we're talking about.
Oh, he further says, who would be the de facto leader of the liberal side in the potential civil war? You don't need a leader on the civilian side. You just have the civilians. If you launch against your civilians, you lost your country, man.
You lost your country.
You don't have a country at that point. Constitution be damned. You don't have a constitution. You can't secure your borders. That's a failed state.
Yeah, and now whoever comes in and wins that will set up new lines or whatever. It's a whole different game. It's civil war now. You don't want to have your president taking military troops and launching them on civilians because they're demonstrating. That is insane. That's insanity. And we've seen countries that have done that and fall straight into disorder, and it brought about immense changes for them. And I don't think that's something that we're going to be looking forward to do out of what's going on right now. That's not what we're looking to do. And Trump was deeply advised against this by some of his military attaché. They were deeply advised him against this move.
Yeah, that would be insanity at this point. I mean, imagine how many countries would cut ties or not so much cut ties, but from an optics perspective, really give it to the United States on from a United Nations standpoint. I mean, they already have the ICC, the black woman who's in charge of the ICC right now, taking the U.S. to task right now. High probability that somebody could be brought down to The Hague. You think it's an accident that Bush Jr. doesn't travel outside the United States?
Or Cheney, they do not leave. They know that they have arrest warrants from them. I think even from France. I think France wants to arrest these guys. It's strange as it may sound, but you have some countries here that actually want to arrest these guys. They say these guys are war criminals. Mm-hmm. So they still have warrants out on them, man. These guys got warrants on them, man. They can't leave. Mm-hmm.
All right, let me jump to the next item on the docket from the New York Post. Surprise found in Jefferson Davis statue being removed in Kentucky. Nothing like a little bourbon when you're putting up a statue. Workers removing a statue of Civil War leader Jefferson Davis from the Kentucky State Capitol in Frankfort on Saturday discovered unexpected artifacts hidden inside the base. A bottle of Glenmore Kentucky Straight Bourbon whiskey and a copy of the State Journal newspaper from October 20th, 1936, the day the statue was erected. Imagine that. These statues were erected long after the Civil War was already over. And these are the losers. One local report suggested that the bottle may have held a piece of paper, but others said the vessel was empty. Kentucky's Historic Properties Advisory Commission voted overwhelmingly Friday to remove the Davis statue. Davis, a one-time U.S. senator who died in 1889, was president of the Confederate States. He was later indicted for treason, but not tried.
They should have hung and burned his ass. But we didn't do that. We let these guys roll. But the terrible thing, that was a terrible mistake. But to say these Confederate statues and stuff, they went up in the 20s. They didn't go up right after the Civil War in 1865. April 9th, they didn't go up after that. After the surrender of Appomattox, that didn't happen. They didn't go up until the 20s, 25 and 1926 and so forth. That's when a lot of these statues first came up. And that was kind of that was very much in response to Black GIs and so forth coming back from the First World War. And they were coming back in, and they were, that's when you really started seeing civil rights really start to burgeon and start to take off then. It was further accelerated certainly after World War II. And then we came into the 50s and the 60s, and then we saw what happened there. But this has been going on for a long time. But that was to reestablish white supremacy. You Black soldiers coming back here, you Negroes, you Niggas better get back in line. You may have been over in Europe racking ass, but you ain't gonna be doing that over here. And if you're in the South, you better be listening to us and what we tell you to do. And this is the way of things over here. It ain't like that. Okay, it ain't like that over there in France, or old Germany, whatever. It's not like that over there, but it's like that over here. So that's kind of what that was about. It's reestablishing white supremacy. That's why those statues that are there really are not about the pride of their ancestors or whatever. It was really very racist thing to say we're reestablishing white order. That's what that was really about. And those should have come down a long time ago. But that's what that was about. So I just wanted to be clear. Those didn't go up until the 20s.
Yeah. And this one was erected in 1936. You imagine that?
Yeah, exactly. They were erected after. This was white supremacy, man. We had lynchings going on. We have lynchings going on today. In fact, I don't know if Mike will cover any of that, but we still have some current day lynchings going on. But lynchings were going on very heavily then in the South, and certainly coming from the Midwest as well, Middle America, where the deep bastion of hatred was coming out of, and those that was very big. It was very, very big in those days, and we had bills actually that came into Congress to go against lynching, and all those bills were were crushed. So
You know what's interesting? You know what's interesting about this is that you know when the U.S. invaded Iraq in '03 and brought Saddam down and then tore down the Saddam statue. Okay, um, you know, people in the United States were ecstatic about this. They loved it. Yes, get the son of a bitch, get him out of here. You know, but when it comes to U.S. Confederate treasonous being having their monuments taken down, and people were saying, well, this is a part of our heritage. How do you support terrorism? Right? On one hand, you support erecting statues of terrorists from the South who did some of the most egregious human rights violations known in the Western Hemisphere, if not the world. But then you have a few lootings happening during a peaceful demonstrations and whatnot, and you call these people, you know, bad people that justifies using military response. How is this? How is it possible that people could not see the contradictions in their positions?
I mean, it's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And there've been some lynchings going on, and I just saw Black Torch. Shout out to Black Torch, who himself just mentioned about 5 Black men being lynched just in the last couple of weeks here in the United States. But people are sitting back here, the guys, they got looters, they're doing this and they're doing that in certain areas, but Black men are getting lynched. Nobody got no smoke for them, though. Nobody got nothing to say. Oh, these are suicides. Suicides? Black men hanging themselves from trees? All right? And now they're looking back into these so-called suicides, saying that these may not have been. So they're looking to see if they're looking to now investigate if they hate crimes. Okay? People got smoke for brothers out here in the streets talking about what they, and sisters as well, talking about, what's going on with Floyd and everything else like that. People are getting uptight about that, but yet brothers are getting lynched, and no one got any smoke for those people in those communities who are doing that. They got nothing to say about that in those communities. You shine bones should be fucking shot talking this shit. I wish there was a fucking civil war out here. I'd be fucking blowing half of your fucking heads off. You motherfuckers. Can you believe this shit? You got nothing to say. You got no smoke for them. But you got smoke for the people over there who are demonstrating against the savagery that's been going on in this country for so long. And now they're going back to the old style lynching. You got no smoke for them. Fuck. That's what I got to say about it.
The article says that the Davis statue is to be relocated to a state park in Davis's birthplace, Fairview, Kentucky. My question is, why is it being relocated at all? Why is it being relocated at all? This person was treasonous, okay? He was treasonous. He was a leader of the Confederates, okay? Why does he get to have... Why does he get to have, or not he, but the statue? Why does the statue get to remain erected? You have certain Black males who have been killed in this country unjustly. A mural goes up, and in the city, I forget where this was. The city had given a citation for littering because the candles that were put there on the anniversary were not obviously they lose their symbolism after a while, so to speak, and so they get the city decides that they're going to clean it up because it's considered to be trash at this point. I can't understand how people can't see the racism in not just the statues but the principal aspect behind it. The principle is that this person was treasonous. Most of these statues that are being erected are treasonous people, and they want to keep these things up. It's just really strange that you want to do that, but that you want to send the U.S. military in on protesters and peaceful demonstrators. Really strange.
It shows you how deep this game of white supremacy and racism really goes in our system. It's so deep and so ingrained. Many of us have found this acceptable.
We have DE Raptor on the panel.
Shalom, everybody. Shalom to the chat. Go, Mike.
Yes, sir.
Hey, I agree with you guys. But
DE.
I agree with you guys, what you guys are saying, but there's something that you left out. These are our treasonous people. When I say our, I talk about the people with lighter shade. If you go all the way back to the founding of the country, you'll see that these people were always protected, no matter what they did. How many of them have been executed for what they did against the country? So they've always been there. There's always somebody who protected them. And I heard a family, well, I shouldn't use that. I heard one of them say that they always have people on both sides so that no matter who wins, they're safe. And I've seen it. I have seen it. I mean, go through history. From what I read and from what I observed during my lifetime, I've seen it happen. They said, these are our people. When the war is over, you're gonna sit down and drink a glass of wine. That's it. Hello? Anybody there? Oh boy. Democrats are communists. The Boston Tea Party. Boston Tea Party, but people on both sides of that conflict here, in the same family now, and don't take the names as any. You see Clinton, but Clinton, what was his name before his name became Clinton? Clinton is an adaptation to something from something else, so that he could live in England. It's like when the Spanish started throwing the people who supported the Muslims, who were the people who were doing the books for the Muslims. The Muslims were the builders, they were the rulers, but who were the people who were doing the books? When the Spanish started throwing them out, they changed the names. And they ended up in the Caribbean for the Spanish, for the Portuguese, for the British. You know, those were the ship captains. This is a family business. And in a family business, they stick with family. It's only us that will say, you know what? I'm not African.
Only us that will say what? Say that again.
I'm not an African.
Yeah, these Negroes, man.
It's only us, bro.
No. Some of the shit got me tight because I've been, I had to cut off one friend talking crazy. I had to cut him off. It's just some stuff I'm hearing, man, from some of us is very disturbing. And I'm looking at the savagery ratcheting up. And I'm telling you, I'm going to say this very quickly. You brothers out here, get your gun permits. Start going to the ranges. Go get your guns legally, get them registered, and start going to the ranges. Start the process now. Some states are going to be a lot easier than others, but if you're certainly, in the southern states or whatever, or you're in these Midwestern states or whatever, get your guns now. Get them now. You can get them. It's very easy to get them before they start shutting you down or trying to shut you down on that. But get your weapons together. Get your training together and be responsible gun owners. Be very responsible with it. Be very responsible with your gun ownership, but make sure you got the GAT. Get the GAT. Sorry. Get your gets.
Mike Rizzi, they are all globalists. They are all globalists. Otherwise, we wouldn't have banana plantations in South America.
Yeah.
You don't get it.
Yep.
You don't get it, bro. They won't be no banana plantations in South America. They got people from that used to own farms in the United States and Brazil that own 30,000 acres of property growing soybeans. They talk about how the Brazilians are cutting down the rainforest. There's a lot of Americans. I met some of them. I know some of them. In Pantanal, they cut down the rainforest and growing soybeans.
I have been out to the Pantanal. I have been out there in Brazil. I've been out to Manaus and all that. That's all that sits right on the edge of the of the Amazonas. I've seen this. All right. These are the lungs of the fucking earth, the lungs of the earth, and they're cutting them down. They have death squads that are going out to these areas right now that are doing a slash and burn game, as they call slash and burn. You have Indios, and others, and even Africanos who are there, who have helped to develop that land and helped to do some very good things there, and they're shooting them down and taking them out. And this is going on right now. This is in my view an international horror that we should all be speaking out against right now in Brazil. You know, right there in the fronteras. This is a huge problem, and this is going on right now. And that's why they got Bolsonaro and these other savages in there running around, you know, supporting a lot of this crap and pushing it. And our companies are there. Americans are there. Americans are there owning this land and pushing it. So what the DE Rap is talking about is absolutely correct. This is to me, it's an international problem, and we have our hand. And some of us, I'm not gonna say us, I'm not including me in it or anybody else, you know, that I would that I hear would be in this, but Americans are involved in this as well, and it's horrifying.
You guys are globalists, all of them. They all make money from this thing. One guy wants to have one argument, and one guy had another argument. Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, they're all the same.
All right.
And you got to we as Black people got to get out of that foolish argument, you know, that two-way thing that they give us, and start thinking for yourself.
All right, I need to get to the next item on the docket. This is from the Washington Post. Mike Pence's deceptions unmask Trump's dangerous re-election strategy. We don't have enough time to go through all this. President Trump and his advisors have plainly decided they have no hope of truly defeating the novel coronavirus and getting the nation on track to a meaningful, sustained economic recovery in time for his re-election. So they are spending far more on their time on the next big thing, creating the illusion that we have already roared most of the way back to victory on both fronts. A window into the inner workings of this effort has just been thrown wide open by Vice President Pence, who reportedly told governors on a conference call to emphasize the role of increased testing and created reported spike in coronavirus cases. At first, this might look like just more of the usual depraved and dishonest minimization of the threat of the coronavirus, but it illustrates a much broader species of duplicity, one that carries active dangers to the country at a perilous moment. On that conference call, Pence encouraged governors to explain to your citizens the magnitude of increase in testing, not merely because more testing might be a good thing, but also because this is a primary cause of the marginal rising numbers of coronavirus cases. This is deceptive, as a new post-analysis finds in 6 states, the 7-day average of new cases has gone up in the past 2 weeks, even as average testing has dropped. In another 14 states, the 7-day average of new cases is rising faster than the average of new tests. Meanwhile, that analysis finds in 10 states, the rise in positive testing has been edging up in the past 2 weeks, a key metric of gauging Pence's claim and the need for a worry about spread. But this deception serves a larger and more pernicious one. The idea that any and all new outbreaks can be dismissed as more localized outbursts and not as a sign of a broader peril. Tellingly, Pence called outbreaks intermittent and took care to tell governors that Trump has been using the term embers. This language has almost certainly not accidental. It's designed to imply something that can easily be doused, that is easily contained without broader damage. The idea that any outbreaks reflect increased testing helps reinforce that impression. But the real picture is much more complicated and worrisome. As health expert Scott Gottlieb points out, these trends, rising cases in many states plus increased positive testing, are concerning and suggestive of expanding outbreaks. I'm not going to read this whole thing because we don't have enough time to go through this, but I get the point that they're making. If you put pressure on these governors to stop doing state testing, then you'll stop getting these number of reports coming in. And so they need to push this agenda in order to make themselves look like, the numbers are going down. In reality, they just stop doing testing. Okay, this is the way they justify reopening the economy, because the numbers are not increasing, they're decreasing, but not because people aren't getting it, but because they're just not testing.
They're not testing. It's crazy. It's a crazy way of justifying reopening up a state when you're not testing your people, so we don't even know how many more people be infected. Apparently, there's another strain of this virus that's supposed to be out right now, and this might be the leader in the next wave. And many of us who may have even recovered from the coronavirus one, if you will, might get hit again with this. So, something to think about.
Yeah. All right, this is from quartz.com. The intertwined histories of the African-American freedom struggle and Ethiopia's war against fascism. It's a great picture. Oh, this is going to be long, and we don't have enough time to go through it. The uproar from the horrific murder of a 46-year-old African-American George Floyd by a white police officer in Minneapolis on May 25th continues to reverberate globally as African-Americans continue to take to the streets in a stand against racism and police brutality. But in Ethiopia, public expressions of solidarity with marchers in America are few and far between. Chapters from Ethiopia's storied resistance against fascism show how the United States Black Lives Matter movement should resonate much more strongly with Ethiopians, young and old. There is a history that links the African-American history of resistance to African anti-colonial effort in response to Europe's 19th century scramble for Africa. The founding fathers of many a Black liberation movement took inspiration in the resilience of a faraway Black African country which successfully fended off military aggression from colonial Italy.
Yep, twice, two times.
Ethiopia, known as Abyssinia, secured international recognition of its territorial sovereignty after it defeated Italy in 1896's Battle of Adwa. The battlefield coup culminated in the end of a campaign which the New York Times described at the time as one of the most disastrous in which the Italians' arms have ever taken part. Ethiopian forces routed the invaders on the mountains of Adwa. The stunning defeat sent shockwaves around the world, especially for those who had deemed Africans little more than slave labor for the economic machinery of the colonial powers, or undisciplined savages. as defeated Italian general, how do you pronounce this? Oresti Barataria?
I can't read it, Mike. I can't see it from where
That's
I am.
fine. That's fine. That's fine. Had dubbed.
Oreste Barateri.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. I thought it was.
A lot of things are named. Well, I shouldn't say. Go ahead.
The events of 1896 had an impact far beyond Ethiopia. The colors of the Ethiopian flag, green, yellow, and red, became the collective banner for Pan-Africanism, a rallying symbol for the pioneers of African resistance. Half a century later, dozens of newly independent African states adopted the colors as part of their national flags. Ideological fruits were born from seeds sowed at the Battle of Adwa. Those seeds sprouted across the Atlantic too, where African Americans were subjugated by Jim Crow laws and institutional white supremacy. Black nationalists drew inspiration from, this is a poorly written grammatical error, from what they saw as a similar underdog type struggle for Ethiopia against the European powers. The Universal Negro Improvement Association, a leading Pan-African organization, named as an official organization anthem, Ethiopia, thou land of our fathers. The writer of the song, Harlem resident and renowned musician Josiah Ford, later took up on the offer to migrate to Ethiopia. African Americans rallied in support of Ethiopia when 40 years later, news of an impending second Italian invasion first made the rounds. Prime Minister Benito Mussolini's warmongering heightened tensions between Harlem's Black and Italian communities, as Ethiopia's fall was portrayed as the extinguishing of a flame that lit across the African diaspora. News of atrocities, including the Italian Air Force's indiscriminate bombing campaign, provoked an intense fury among African Americans. There is evidence a boycott of Italian products, among other efforts, was launched. Protests were organized. While Black-run newspapers such as the Negro Liberator highlighted atrocities committed in Ethiopia and reported extensively on pro-Ethiopia demonstrations, the New York Times, with the headline, "Mob of 400 Battles the Police in Harlem," Italian stores raided, man shot in crowd, used choice words like mob to describe pro-Ethiopia protesters. A campaign to recruit volunteers to join the Ethiopian resistance recruited thousands, including at least 1,500 from Harlem alone and another 600 from Texas, according to the newspaper clippings from the era. In the end, the U.S. State Department prevented anyone from traveling, prohibiting participation of its citizens in foreign wars, but a few did, including renowned aviator John Robinson, who took charge of Ethiopia's fledgling Air Force.
Yeah, they came by and when he came back, they tried to vilify him. They tried to vilify him for that.
Mm-hmm.
Vilify him for that. They certainly did. Yeah.
Ethiopia figures for its death toll from the invasion in 1935 up until the end of the occupation in 1941 are as high as 500,000, mostly innocent civilians. Ethiopia was in no shortage of supporters in the United States who played a significant role in voicing the plight of Mussolini's victims in Ethiopia. In 1954, recognizing this, Ethiopia's Emperor Haile Selassie visited Harlem to thank residents. According to an Associated Press photo caption, an estimated 200,000 persons lined the streets to give the monarch a warm, noisy welcome during his first visit to Harlem. He presented to the church a gold processional cross made in Ethiopia and was given an oil portrait of himself by Ivan Tate, African-American artist. We really don't have a whole lot of time to go through this, man. This is something we need to take another night on. But
the history behind this is so deep and so instrumental. It fostered so much of the Black, not only Black power, but Black consciousness, the whole game here circled around that. That's when I look at Black people say, well, they don't like you though, or Africa, what does Africa have to do with us? It's you people that have no understanding of history. You don't know the history. You have no idea. You were intimately tied, and events that happen here were tied to events that were happening overseas. We are intimately tied to Africa in so many ways. So when I see these people, fuck Africa, and they say these kind of things like that, these are people who are they're lost. They don't know. They have no idea. And what this article has not finished out saying is that in the end, Mussolini's forces were once again repelled out of Ethiopia, and they lost. One more again, they could not gain control of Ethiopia the way that they thought they could. They lost one more again. Ethiopia, one of the few nations on the African continent that was never colonized by the Europeans. And Italy tried twice, and they lost. They did a lot of damage when they first came in there. And I remember going up against some Italian guy years ago named James Vallone. I never forget him. Vallone. Then he was up there trying to talk smack to me, and then I dropped the history on him and shut him down in front of all of his people. And then they they were angry, but they were kind of laughing at Vallone because he looked stupid. He started to turn red after I tore his the copy out of the frame. But at the end of the day, they did not take control of Ethiopia. And these were two savage attacks with them, just about almost 30 some odd years apart. And then there it was. There's history right there. This is huge history. We should definitely be on top of it, but it shows you Pan-Africanism, its connection between us and the United States, how, between us, the United States, and Africa, and Harlem being, Harlem, USA, an international city that has always been for not only for Africa but Asia as well, and others of South America, Latin America too. Very significant the role we play internationally. We cannot forget that. And as we talk here in the Brain Trust, we should consistently keep that in mind of our very powerful international connections that have that Black Americans have been a part of, and how other people of other lands have been a part of us. And that is actually impetus for us to gain our strength. It's not a weakness; it's a strength for us. And we have to consistently look at it in that perspective. And if anyone has any disagreement with me, please let me hear it.
Well, I don't disagree with you, but I'm going to add a little bit on to that. Not necessarily, it complements what you were saying. It kind of like underpins it. The amount of support that came from both sides across the Atlantic from Africa, when Africa was fighting for its independence, and before that, even before that, across the Atlantic, it was going to Haiti first, and then Haiti and the US, France, everywhere that Black people was, in England, there was a connection before 73 that, if something happened in Africa, it wasn't written in the papers, but we knew about it, and there was no internet. I was in England in 73, 74. And I can tell you what used to happen. Things that happened in England, people in Africa knew about it. Things that happened in America, people in England knew about it. And they were always talking to one another. There was a reason why the US silenced everybody in 73. Well, it didn't start in 73, but ended in 73. And out of that came this push for. I don't want to get the thing mixed up in this, but what we have today with a change in leadership, male leadership was suppressed after that. You can see it today in Africa, that the European, American, you don't see the Chinese doing it or the Russians doing it, they're pushing this multi uh, what I don't even know alphabet system and um, female dominance. But everything what we have now is like uh, uh, um, shoot just an image of what used to happen in Africa. Even though we have well, it's starting to grow again because of the communication that we have now. Everybody has a cell phone and everybody is taking a video, and everything that happened in Africa you can see it anywhere on the internet. And that you even though we didn't have the system then, word of mouth carried it. Somebody had somebody in Africa, and that I mean, some what I said, somebody had somebody in Africa who used to get word here or to Europe when something happened in Africa. So when you see that this article talk about people from the United States volunteering to go join the Ethiopian Air Force and Army and all that, shoot, people join the rebels fighting against South African government.
Yep.
So there was a connection. There was a connection there. It's only the younger generation, and it began in '73, like I said, that lost it.
Well, I mean, yeah, a lot of youngsters, they, if you go to into some of the Black history, or Black studies areas, you'll pick some of this up. But for the average young Black person dipping around here right now and sitting here talking and saying the things that they're profoundly ignorant of any of this. They're profoundly ignorant. I thought it was General Chiano in World War excuse me, in the 1896 conflict, but he was in the Second World War and he ended up losing. But that's why I said Ballesteros. I forgot about him. We were profoundly ignorant of a lot of these histories, and there's a reason for it. They don't want There's a reason you're certainly not gonna learn it in your public high school or anything else like that. It's not gonna happen. But these things do exist. This history does exist. These events, these things that went on in the past are huge. We don't know about it. We need to consistently speak about it. And I just like to, hey Mike, that's a great article. You came in there with. We should have a separate day on that. That article is huge, and it's exceedingly significant to Black and African experience alike, and it links us together. These Americans who are here, who think that there's no connection to Africa and fuck Africa, is crazy. They just don't know. And we need to study that more. We need to edify people more on that. If they haven't learned, they need to learn that. And if we have to teach some of that, then we need to do it as well.
All right, let me jump to the next item on the docket from Washington Post. Former city council candidate arrested after a man is shot at New Mexico protest with militia group. Shit is ill. Shit is ill. Police in Albuquerque on Tuesday announced they had arrested a former city council candidate who they say shot and wounded a man at a protest that grew contentious as demonstrators clashed with a militia group. The Monday night episode, which erupted after a crowd tried to tear down a monument to Spanish conquistador Juan de Onate, appeared to reflect a phenomenon that federal and state officials have long warned about: protests over racial injustice, such as ones currently roiling in American cities, can draw a medley of fringe actors or groups with their own ideological agendas. Recent protests against Onate statues in New Mexico mirror similar calls to tear down Confederate monuments amid a rise in demonstrations after the killing of George Floyd, who died on May 25th after a Minneapolis police officer knelt on his neck for nearly 9 minutes. In the hours leading up to the violence Monday, protesters faced off with members of an armed group that calls itself the New Mexico Civil Guard and counter-protesters toting All Lives Matter signs. Several members of the armed group told the Washington Post they were worried that tearing down the statue would begin widespread destruction of property. The members said they did not know the alleged shooter or the victim and cast themselves as attempted to prevent violence from erupting at a tense scene. But state officials denounced their presence, which they said was meant to intimidate protesters. This is ill.
People are dangerous. I've been stopped by them a couple times when I was in Arizona. These motherfuckers are not playing. They're going on Mexican fucking safaris with guns. They don't give a fuck.
Fuck. Yo, MOT. I know you got to be packing a heater up in your rig, fam. I hope you are.
It's illegal, right?
Yeah, getting caught is illegal.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I'm traveling around. I got the long slide, and I got the Mossberg, and I got the Moss cold chilling. Forget about it, man. Forget about this. These guys out here, they're going ham. And if they're out there talking about they're on safari, they're on safaris. Holy
they are.
Shit.
I mean, like, dude, they out there more deep than the actual Border Patrol. And the Border Patrol don't say a damn word about these people.
No, they don't.
Dressed to the nines, looking like motherfuckers just landed off the set of like Rambo. These people are ready, man.
New Mexico.
They go out there. New Mexico too. I'm telling you, the people are out there with night vision goggles, thermal imaging. These people are serious.
Yeah, I'm hearing about this for years. Yeah. Go ahead, Omilty. Go ahead. Wow.
And it's like they know these people are going out there roving around killing people, but they don't even attempt to try to stop them because trying to stop them would just make them grow more and more. And a lot of these people are former law enforcement and government people, along with veterans and stupid shit like that. It's just, there's no reason to have this stuff around, man. It's not going to end well. And they know what these dudes' reputations are. So to let these dudes show up anywhere with guns, like, what do you think the guns are for? Like,
Yeah, I didn't know they would they pulled up on you, MOT. I'm surprised that they would do something like that.
Dude, I'm telling you, if you're parked on the road for any period of time, they're just surfing out of nowhere.
Would they try to do a citizen's arrest on you?
No. Flashlights, seeing who inside the truck. I'm like, man, who are you guys?
Wow.
Get in their truck and drive off. And then I wrote down like the license plate number, and then like the next day, because I was overnight, so I just moved to the way station, and I seen the truck.
Your phone's
These
breaking.
dudes easily could have looked like the National Guard.
Oh, okay. Yeah, your mic was breaking up a lot, but I caught the last piece of it.
That's pretty scary. It's pretty scary.
I tell
Yeah,
you, man, these people are overweight, and these people are packing heat, and it's very obvious why they're doing it, and it's not a joke.
Mm-hmm. This is crazy. This is my first time ever hearing about them, so I don't really track these groups like that. But it's interesting. It's very interesting.
I actually heard about one of these boogie or what they call one of these boogaloo boys. Actually got shot a police officer, and I'm thinking it was they were at a demonstration, and I'm trying to think what state it was. I just heard it on the Real News, and I was going through it very quickly, but they caught a couple of these guys, these supremacists. It seems like the Boogaloo boys or whatever, the Boogaloo crew or something, and they shot a police officer. I want to think it was in Albuquerque. I think it was in Albuquerque, if I'm not mistaken. I believe it was there. They at a demonstration, man. One of these demonstrations out there. They were out there shooting people. So they went and got them, and they saw that these guys are trying to discredit the movement. But these guys are out there with guns, and they're blasting. They're firing on people. So as long as I think the more the deeper this thing's going to get. Anyway, go ahead.
Here's the thing, man. you can easily have NORAD or Cheyenne Mountain identify every single person out there who's doing violence. And don't tell me that they're not doing it, because I know they're doing it. I know they're doing it.
He said NORAD. That's funny.
Some. I mean, dude, because we can do this for terrorists on the ground overseas. It's unconscionable that they don't know who's setting fire to these damn buildings over there.
Oh yeah, you're right about that. Yeah, you're right about that. The most advanced U.S. satellite can see all the way down to I think it's about three feet on the ground. So.
Yep, they can see your license plate, bro.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, they're working on facial recognition from satellites. It shouldn't be.
They could do a hell of a lot more than that. 3 feet was probably like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Right after 9/11 is when they got that capability. The type of shit they could do now, there's no way in the world that they don't know who's setting these fires out there. There's no way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, part of the speculation is that it's law enforcement doing it. So
it is. It actually is.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can
That's
go to the law.
That's actually been the playbook for them to do that, because these people all the time, they surf in all the time. The fires are set and they out of there every time. It's the same MO every time. And it's like when the police crack down, it happens like clockwork. Right after something like that happens, they rush in and just take people there who are still standing there on this fake secure the scene nonsense.
Yeah, there's some police organizations that claim to represent police where the police go to vent.
No.
And a lot of these guys are talking about, how it can be done. They're saying we are doing it. They're suggesting, if we do so and so and so, or if somebody does so and so, or if this.
All you have to do, if you want to end it, all you have to do is just make a law. Any law enforcement caught being a part of this action will be executed by the federal government. And see who complains.
Yeah, I mean that's draconian, but man, I think that would sure. But they don't want it. I don't.
But you got to have the military surveillance over the area, and that to be the actual solution for it. Because it's unconscionable that these people are going around setting fires to their own community. They've always said it doesn't matter whether it's Ferguson or St. Louis. It's always people who they don't know come in and set fires and they're out of there.
Well, go ahead and finish, please.
No, that's it.
No, because there's a video on YouTube from Ferguson where they caught one of these Mazungas throwing a Molotov cocktail bomb at the police, and the brothers caught him and said, "Where you from?" He said, "Oh, I'm from around here." Where from around here?
Yep.
He really wasn't from around there. He was a detractor. Okay. They caught him. When they caught him, they knocked the bottle out of his hand and pinned him up against the wall. The video's on YouTube somewhere. I gotta find it. And they basically asked him, who sent you over here? Because you're not from around here. Nobody don't know you from Ferguson. Who the hell are you? Okay, he was sent in by somebody, but they basically knocked the Molotov cocktail bomb out of his hand, checked his pockets, ran his pockets, and kicked his ass out of the protest.
They had this. I mean, these two Mazungas that shot this police officer, one of them was was out of the United States military. He was actually a military police, I think, for the Air Force. He was a police officer in the Air Force, and it was like, what are you doing here shooting other cops down? I mean, what the fuck is this? So there's some real nefarious shit going on that you have going down, and this is going down right now with the demonstrations that we have. So that's why when I sit down and I look at these shines that are out here saying stuff about Black people and what they're doing, they're not understanding what's really going on in some of these with these demonstrations, the layered nature of what's happening here, the layered nature of different types of actors coming in and protagonists coming in and creating, and antagonists coming in and creating in creating some of these issues, to, you know, leave it with very little credibility, and how dangerous these guys are. I mean, just truly how dangerous they are, you know. And the MOT and was saying this, but
I
this
mean,
is
but
real.
they're getting very sloppy.
They are sloppy, but they're out there. They're out there doing. They're out
It's
there
probably
doing
because
the
they have the
post.
same MO every time. I mean, it's like the cameras don't work until they need to work for a specific purpose. That's why I tell people, man, if you see somebody, have that camera phone out. Have these people up against the wall. Identify who these people are, man. Somebody knows who these people are, dude. And they take advantage of the no snitching bullshit aspect of black people, and that's how they keep getting away with it.
With the amount of information available on, from the time you put somebody's picture on the wall in the internet, I mean, wait 5 minutes and somebody somewhere is going to say, I know this guy. So that's what should be happening. You take a picture of them in the act, put it up, and their life is going to be gone after that.
And my grandfather said that they used to pay people to come to the communities and kind of like do some of that stuff. Most of these people were like black people who were doing that type of stuff. So it's a very old tactic to try to discredit anything. You know, these people walk in out of nowhere. They have kind of like this police presence. They do this stuff and they out of there, and everybody else there get arrested. And nobody knows what's going on in the confusion. So they end up securing the scene, and then like 9, 10 months, 13 months later, they drop all the charges against everybody. That's the thing. No one ever gets arrested and go to jail long term. They just do that to get them up out of there, and then they sign some type of, you know, release saying that they won't go against the state in order to have these charges dismissed. And we gotta stop this stuff, man.
Yeah, the thing is, the Black Lives Matter protests, they found 2 NYPD undercover officers within the protest itself. You know, they were spotted. Somebody knew somebody faces, and
NY fucking PD. What, dude? This is so far out of your jurisdiction of what you're supposed to be doing. Like, this shit is actually illegal. Illegal.
Somebody saw their faces and connected it to their accounts on Facebook and on for the NYPD I guess graduating class or something like that. So they knew who these people were.
It's crazy because, and then some of these groups are coming in with straight ideas of looting and just stealing shit and ripping shit off and doing ill shit just to be out there to really try to really bring a lot of confusion and bring a lot of discredit to these movements. Because they had one police officer who they actually saw who was part of the Minneapolis police, who was involved in the smashing up of one of the in the pharmacy sections, throwing shit around. They're like, oh, there's one of these cops in here. So they identified that. They tried to crush that in the news. But these are old tactics. This is something that's been going on a long time. And this is
stuff. Telling people, stay home. You go out there, you're on your own. Let those people who go out there who got the protection go do that. Only thing you got to do is register with the Secretary of State and vote for somebody who's going to fire the police chief or whatever. Because the only thing that's going to happen is public pressure. You don't have to be out there. So that way you let those people who go out there who specifically cause those problems with these damn misinformed and undisciplined people does not understand, stay home. They mix in between you. They set the fires. They're out there. You stay because you live there. But if you all stayed your ass at home or went with a group of people who all wore the same stuff, it'd be very obvious who's with who. Nobody wants to organize, man. It's so simple, but nobody wants to be disciplined.
Well, I would say I can certainly understand people's right to protest. We have a right to do that, and protest is a part of the United States, and I believe that we should have a right to protest. But I think with some of this violent shit that's going on, and you've got these alt-right groups and these militias and these other wild men coming out here in the middle of this, especially that's highly racially charged. If you are going to jump out here, I'm going to say something a little bit different than what MOT said. I'm following where he's coming from. If you are going to jump out here, you better be careful. And people have, but there's a good chance, that things could go awry. The millennials and the Z's are out there. I'm gonna give them credit. The millennials and the Z's are out there, speaking up. So I am going to have to tip my hat to them a little bit there as well for dealing with some of this madness. Because MOT's right, you get out there, shit could get real hectic for you. So those who are taking those risks to get out there, they're showing their warrior side or their desire to let their feelings be known. And I can't hate on them for doing that. I can't get mad at them for doing it.
Let me jump to the next one.
The problem is if you go back to I don't know 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s when people were fighting for liberation, let's say. Everybody's had their idea of equality and all that kind of thing, but liberation from the threat that we still enduring today. There was a leader, and everybody pretty much he said, look, we're gonna go downtown and we're gonna block traffic today. They go downtown, they block traffic. Nobody was violent.
My man, I think unfortunately I've looked at these the history of a lot of these uprisings or protests that we have, and many of them, a large number of them, have been quite violent. It's unfortunate to have to sit down and say that, but to think that all the stuff was peaceful would be less than truthful. There's a lot of violence involved, a lot of unrest, a lot of breaking of windows and people running out and cops getting involved and agent provocateurs and all that. This goes back, to the turn of the century. So I'm going to have to disagree with you on that. I'm going to have to disagree with you on some of that. But in order for Mike to keep it moving, I'm
saying is that you didn't have the neighborhood being burnt down. You didn't have stores being burnt, looted, and all that kind of stuff. People went down.
We've had some big movements. The '60s, the Watts riots and all that. We had some big.
Okay.
Right. Let me go to the next item on the docket. This is too long-winded. All right. This is from the Washington Post. Sister of North Korea's Kim Jong-un rises in prominence as threats replace outreach. I think I saw her at Harvard before. There is a new face near the top in North Korea, but no change in rhetoric. Kim Yo-jong, the younger sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, was officially elevated this month to a high-profile role that effectively cast her as her brother's deputy. She also has become a hardline messenger for the North as it turns. What the fuck is this? As a high-profile role that effectively cast her as her brother's deputy. She also has become a hardline messenger for the North as it turns away from the overtures to South Korea and United States that once raised hopes for a potential deal to roll back Pyongyang's nuclear program. On Saturday, Kim Yo-jong slammed as useless a South Korean liaison office in the city of Kaesong, which served as a de facto diplomatic post for the South. She warned that the office would be destroyed before long. That happened Tuesday when North Korea blew up the building and threatened to move troops into the demilitarized zone. Kim Jong-un's rise in a stunning shift that has ignited fresh speculation that North Korea's leader is not in the best of health, despite no firm evidence of illness, and that he could be looking ahead to ensure power remains with the family. Some officials in South Korea initially welcomed the news of Kim Jong's greater role, hoping she could provide a direct channel to Kim Jong-un's an effort to bring the two Koreas closer. But several experts in North Korean affairs warned against expecting any change in the regime's increasingly aggressive posturing, which has blasted holes in the hopes of a rapprochement with the United States and South Korea. So they're trying to, I guess this would be their version of like a Hillary Clinton or something like that, this real hardline woman who's in power, like a Secretary of State. I don't know. I mean, there's like very little information about her in terms of like where her politics are and whatnot. I imagine it's one for one with the state itself. It's not like, oh, she's gonna bring feminism into the DPRK. I'm sorry, that's not gonna happen. If the people in the South thought that, you would not be seeing Pussy Riot in Pyongyang. But she was at the she has traveled around in South Korea, so it sounds to me like she's going to be taking a broader role in all of this. Although I don't agree with North Korea on cutting off diplomatic relations. Why start the process and then cut them off? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You're already 1/3 of the way there. Why not just complete the whole entire transition? It doesn't. You have more to gain than anybody else. So why cut it off now? South Korea was your gateway to the broader world, where it doesn't make any sense to cut off relations with them just to spite the United States. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Well, Mike, like, other than the manosphere, man, nobody resets conversations like North Korea, dude.
Maybe he's in the management.
Oh yeah, man. They got reset buttons everywhere, man.
Yeah.
Fully stopped.
Well, I mean, this is the only way to negotiate, right?
Yeah, that's it.
But the thing is, they had already started the railroad process into North Korea. Okay, they had already started the telephone communication, laying down the communication lines for that. And I think the Russians, if I remember correctly, were going to push gas through North Korea to deliver energy to the south, and would have gave North Korea immense amounts of money by the billions. Not sure why cut it all off now. For what? Despite Trump? Fuck him. They should have waited until November to do something like that.
Oh yeah.
Well, they're working from you gotta understand this. It's like the company I used to work for.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime negotiate, I say when the contract was coming up for negotiation,
Mm-hmm.
about 6 months, the company all would come out with this hardline rhetoric. You know what I'm saying? We're losing money. We can't afford to give you guys what you're asking for. We're going to have to cut back on service because the economy is down. We lost money in the last quarter, and that's what the Koreans doing. The Koreans are saying, look, we don't need to talk to you because you're just full of it. You think we're gonna fall for this rope of dope that you got, and we're not falling for it. To hell with you. We don't even want to talk to you anymore. But when they sit down at the table, the South gonna come with a program that says, you know what? We think you should look at this because it's a good program.
Right.
The Koreans gonna look at it, the North gonna look at it and say, look, man, look, we already told you we ain't gonna fall for this crap anymore. Then the South gonna go back and come back with something that they think is better, a better language or whatever the case might be in the North. They say, okay, yeah, we think we'll look at this and see what it says. But that's the way it's going. And the other thing is that the backer of the South Korea, whether it be NATO or North America, they are now on the backstroke somewhat, on the hind leg. They kind of like was pushing forward, but now they're stopped. All these things you see happening in elections in America, the COVID, Trump can't decide what to do, how to do it. His people are I mean, the country is in upheaval. So the North are playing it, and the Chinese are behind them.
Right.
The Russians are behind them. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
So that's the way I look at this thing.
Yep. That makes sense. It makes sense. Let me jump to this next item on the docket from CNBC.com. Russia concerned for human rights as it watches U.S. protests, Kremlin says. Send bottles of vodka. Sincerely yours, Vladimir. Russia has said that protests and civil unrest in the U.S. following the death of George Floyd are a domestic issue. Russian President Vladimir Putin spokesman told CNBC, although it has concerns for any abuses of human rights there and anywhere else in the world. We consider it to be a domestic affair of the United States, and we don't want to interfere. Dmitry Peskov, a top Russian official and President Putin's spokesman, told CNBC on Tuesday. At the same time, we are concerned about respect for human rights in every corner of the world, and that's applicable for the United States as well. He said, adding that the verbal mood in the U.S. had appeared to contribute to Russophobia, with some high-profile commentators, most notably by President Obama's former National Security Advisor Susan Rice, insinuating that Russia had helped to stoke unrest in the U.S. Russian officials were outraged at the accusations that Russia might be responsible for the social unrest that followed the death of George Floyd, an unarmed Black man who died in police custody in late May, and whose death sparked mass protests across America against racism and police brutality. When we first saw the outbreaks of those riots in the U.S., the first thing we heard is one of the voices saying, well, probably Russia is staying behind those riots. It's very hard for us to understand these comments and the reason for them, Pascal said. What is going on in the United States? What is going on in the States with these riots and protests? Protest is America's domestic affair. We hate it when someone is trying to interfere in our domestic affairs, and we never do it ourselves. Yeah. Saying Russia's concerned about human rights are concerned about respect for human rights in every country in the world is quite natural. Russia's own record on human rights record has come under repeated scrutiny and criticism for years amid crackdowns of opposition politicians and activists, gender-based violence, and death in police custody, among other abuses, according to human rights associations. Last week, the Kremlin appeared to take the opportunity to accuse U.S. of hypocrisy, telling it to improve its approach to human rights and to thoroughly investigate the murder of George Floyd. Russia's foreign ministry said in a statement on May 29th that the U.S. has certainly accumulated systematic human rights problems, race, ethnic and religious discrimination, police brutality, bias of justice, crowded prisons, and uncontrolled use of firearms and self-defense weapons by individuals, to name a few. We are urging the U.S. authorities to take effective measures to improve the current state of affairs, resume good faith efforts to honor international commitments, and tailor national legislation to the UN basic principles on the use of force and firearms by law enforcement. Which is what I told somebody else on their channel, that we have to go by what the UN's basic principles were last week. I said that. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova caused a stir by going one step further, reportedly telling the U.S. that it's time for the U.S. to drop the mentor's tone and look in the mirror. President Trump's administration has been accused of heavy-handed response to demonstrations threatening to deploy the military at one point, and when riot police and military police used tear gas to disperse protesters outside the White House. A controversial response to the protests and somewhat incoherent approach to the coronavirus crisis have damaged Trump's approval ratings and lent a boost to his Democratic rival Joe Biden. Ask on Russia's perception of voter polls and if the Kremlin was preparing for a possible change of president. Peskov said Russia's interest was purely on improving U.S.-Russia relations, whoever was in charge. It's the business of American people to think about what was done right by their politicians and what was done wrong and who's better or worse, Peskov said. Our business is to wish for someone who is objectively heading for improving our bilateral relations as ruling America. So we would prefer we would prefer that America and Washington is interested in getting our bilateral relations to better levels for the sake of our two peoples and for the sake of global stability and security. So yeah, I don't, I don't see anything wrong with what's being said here, unless someone else can find something wrong here.
I mean, it's just the basic and the most minimum thing that they can say without taking a side. A whole bunch of nothing.
All right, here's the last item on the docket before we close out of here. This is from the New York Times. Putin says U.S. is in deep internal crisis. The Russian leader described an American poisoned by racism and violence and paralyzed by the refusal of President Donald Trump's opponents to accept the 2016 election results. President Vladimir Putin of Russia on Sunday described the United States as a country gripped by a deep internal crisis and attributed it to what he said was a refusal by opponents of President Trump to accept his obvious 2016 election victory and his legitimacy as leader. Speaking in his first interview since the coronavirus pandemic hit Russia hard 3 months ago and forced him to take shelter at his country residence, Mr. Putin pointed to the racial tensions that have put cities across the United States on edge. Russia, and before that, the Soviet Union, he said, always had lots of sympathy for the fight of African Americans for their natural rights. But Mr. Putin said, when protests turned into mayhem and pogroms, I see nothing good for the country. He described the pulling down of statues as undoubtedly a destructive phenomenon and claimed that protests had at times been affected by radical nationalism and extremism. While insisting that he wanted to be very careful in his comments on events in the United States, Mr. Putin had often been accused of trying to sow American division and appeared to be using the interview to do so again, taking a swipe at America's handling of coronavirus under Mr. Trump. Mr. Putin, too, had come under pointed criticism over his response to the pandemic. With his approval rating at their lowest since he came to power 20 years ago, he has been eager to declare victory over the coronavirus so that health concerns don't again disrupt nationwide military parades, now scheduled for June 24th, and a referendum postponed until July 1st on constitutional changes that would allow him to stay in office until 2036.
What?
Yeah. He's trying to be czar. He's trying to be another czar up in there. But what I find interesting is that he's sitting here saying that there's racial tensions because people can't accept Trump's election. He's blaming stuff on Trump. He doesn't know America, man.
Come on, man. Yeah.
This man, this little guy, he does not understand. He doesn't understand. And he doesn't
Mr.
understand.
Putin also used the interview to take aim at opponents of Mr. Trump who have accused the Kremlin of tilting the 2016 election in his favor, something Moscow has repeatedly denied of doing. American intelligence agencies, in a joint assessment of suspected Russian meddling in the 2016 vote, concluded in January 2018 that Vladimir Putin ordered an influence campaign in 2016 aimed at the US presidential election. America's longstanding problem with racism, Mr. Putin said, had aggravated a deep crisis of legitimacy that we have been observing for a long time. Instead of accepting that Mr. Trump obviously won in an absolutely democratic way, supporters of Hillary Clinton came up with all sorts of fables to cast doubt of his legitimacy, he said. Mr. Putin's comments were broadcast Sunday evening on state television after a weekly television news digest that gave a picture of relentless mayhem on American streets. The host, Dmitry Kislyak, suggested that the United States today resembles the Soviet Union as it stumbled towards collapse at the end of 1991. Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with that. Complete agreement with that. Yeah, I don't have any qualms with what he said. I think he was pretty much on the money.
You think the racial issues is strictly about the Trump campaign as well?
No, he's saying that the Russophobia that they have is being used for this not accepting Trump, the election is what he's saying. That's why.
Okay, the Russophobia. Yeah. Okay, I can get with that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's saying the Russophobia. So he's saying the racism, the deep-seated racism, is what's causing them to reject the results. He's right about that. And they tried to blame the Russians, and then tried to blame the Russians on hacking the election, and it turns out that this was never true. Although this article doesn't even seem to even cover that part, they seem to leave that out. Very disingenuous of them, but.
Well, that's a big issue. A lot of people still don't want to touch that, but you and I went over that in some detail. But yeah, it seems as though that was, the Russians' hand in this was really not really there. And in fact, we might be looking more at the CIA's hand in this. Am I correct? Would I be right?
Yeah, maybe even Mossad for that matter. But
yeah, maybe, yeah.
And so, I think a strong move that Putin could have played with this was maybe even giving, because they said that Russia has always, even during the Soviet Union, have sympathized with the African American plight in America. That's true.
Yeah,
the great Paul Robeson went to Russia during the Soviet.
They named a mountain after him. Mm-hmm.
And Roy Jones Jr. has been in Russia, quite a few times, doing, teaching boxing out there. Very interesting. Very interesting. Although I don't know a whole lot of African Americans who go to who go out to Russia. All the stories I've read on communism and post-communism have been very welcoming to African Americans. So I find this to be very interesting. I think a strong card that Putin could have played on this was offering, STEM graduate STEM degrees to African American men in America to come study in Moscow. I think that would have been a huge.
Oh man.
Well, let me say this. That would have been really good, but Russia itself today does have its issues with its nationalists, its right wingers, and its Nazis that are there, and it has quite a bit of racism going on itself in that state. So I know Putin may be speaking to that because he can take advantage of what's going on with to the madness that's going on here. But there's quite a bit of racism in Russia, where black, especially Nigerians and stuff who've gone in to study, have come underneath attack. They even burned a student dormitory that had minority students in there, tried to burn one down with students in there and stuff. So what's going on with them is quite negative as well. So to have a lot of black men go over there, be cool, but a black American was killed there a few years ago in Moscow. So they have been some issues. There have been quite a bit of racial issues with the supremacists. Now Putin has tried to put a foot on some of this. He has, but people are thinking that he supports a lot of these extremist groups himself. But but the reason why some of the racial stuff is going on, they don't want that to be played out. He doesn't want that to be played out in his state. He doesn't want that to be seen. So.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, anywhere in those in Eastern Europe, I mean, you're always going to have these sort of right-wing nationalists out there. That's always been there. That hasn't gone anywhere. I'm saying from a presidential standpoint, it wouldn't have cost him to do. It wouldn't have cost him anything to say for African American men, there's a scholarship program to come study in Moscow or St. Petersburg. That wouldn't have cost them anything. And so, regardless if they have racism in their country, it doesn't even matter. You got racism in America, and no one's doing anything about it. So I don't see the correlation between the two. But
I bring it up because I think that they're similar. I've been there. I understand exactly what's going on there. I see what's been happening in this place, and I certainly know the how would I say, the atmosphere. And it has been, that he's cracked down on some of the far right wingers there. Once Russia went down, once the Soviet Union went down, and it went, pretty much to Russia, if you will. It was a very strong nationalist type of bent that that went there, and Russian people, tend to be kind of racist, even though they'll deal with you and so forth, and you can't have fun there. But they have a strong racist bent, and certainly those right wingers in that country were somewhat extreme, and they showed a lot of racism towards Muslims and stuff who were coming over. Certainly Nigerians who go there to go to school and so forth. They saw a lot of unrest, saw a lot of racial unrest there as well. So I'm not downing them, and I'm not saying anything to say it's so much against what's going on here, because over here, racism is something we have exported as a product and as a tool for the West. That's something that we certainly developed here and exported. There's no question about it. But Russia, it would be great if we could, I think what you said as far as having, black men go out there and study and all that. I'd say, yeah, but I'd also say, make sure, you have, a few Todovorish, with you, some friends who could really help you out a little bit, because you might run into some shit up in there too. You just might run up in there. Then they understand.
I'm not saying that you won't run into any racism. I'm saying that's that's secondary to an agenda. That's secondary to the agenda.
I understand what you're saying. I follow you.
Yeah. The thing is, you expect Russians to be nationalists in their country. They're indigenous to the land. In America, white people are not indigenous to the land, so their racism is all for naught. It's all it's intended as a means to safeguard themselves, but Russians are trying to safeguard their state, and so I'm just making the point that Putin could have taken advantage of this. I'm surprised he didn't go a little bit further. I'm pretty sure the pandemic has played a significant role in all of this, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he has to, black people have to come to Russia. It doesn't necessarily mean that. You could have online schools. Okay, that could easily have been taking place. You could have easily had an online school set up and had black men graduate with computer science degrees from the University of St. Petersburg or something like that. That could have easily have been done. It wouldn't have cost them a dime. It's just something to think about, geopolitically speaking, that where there's fire, man, there's opportunity, so to speak. Take advantage of these sort of loopholes in the conflict. So, D Raptor, you were going to say something?
Yeah, you're right about. I don't know if you can hear me because my thing is acting up.
Yep.
But you're right about what you said. This I don't think there are other things involved in this situation with Black people in America. People don't want to be getting into it. The old Soviet Union might have, but considering their connection to Africa, they might have invited, Black men, especially into Russia, to study, offer them scholarships and so forth. But I don't think this president or this Russia wants to get involved in something like this. They're right now watching the United States with a kind of a sad but focused eye. That says, you know what, we can't trust you.
Right. Can't trust the American state, I mean. Yeah, I think the E-Raptor's microphone's having some issues. Yeah, I think this was a missed moment for him. Although I think, the small piece was okay. I definitely think this was a, big missed opportunity for him. Because when it came to Haiti last year, he offered Haitians visa-free travel from Haiti to Russia. I thought that was one of the most slickest moves. He had a hat trick, if anything, that he pulled out of his hat to have foreign policy in the Caribbean with the Monroe Doctrine still in place. I thought that was a slick move.
I just think Putin's got some issues with America as well. He's got some issues with what's going on over here. That's we put a lot of sanctions on Russia. We've done a lot of things, to definitely to try to irritate him and again to get up in his craw. You know what I mean? So we haven't been what we like to call real krutoy boys. Real kind of easygoing dudes, as they say in Russian. But that's part of our problem. I think this is a relations issue between countries. So I just think I think he did blow an opportunity. But do you think he got emotional here because of some of what was going on? Is that part of it? That would be some of my questions.
What, emotional in which way?
No, hey man, I'm not taking these guys in. Look how America's been, been playing ball with us recently. I ain't playing. I ain't doing that. I'm not trying to, do anything with these guys. Right? That's kind of what I'm thinking. I'm not sure. I'm not in the head, but I'm just, just maybe putting that out there. I'm not sure.
No, he's a very calculated person. Remember, he's a chess champ, right? I mean, he is very calculated in what his thoughts are. Politically, because I watched the interview as well, not just the article, but I watched the interview when he said it. And so he's very reserved in this. I think because of the political climate, maybe during the Obama administration, he would have said something more leaning to what I was saying, because the climate was different. And so, because he does it for Africans, right? I mean, like you brought up, Nigerians who go to, Moscow to study and stuff like that, St. Petersburg to study. I think that, he kind of looked at this and was like, because he's talked about this before during the Obama administration that America, he said something to the effect, I'm kind of paraphrasing, that Russia was not built by African slaves. He's kind of, pointing the finger at the United States, like, you have this history and we don't have that. And so we don't have these sort of issues and tensions when we go into Africa. He's right about that. America still has not dealt with its historical injustices of slavery. It just has not really done anything about it. And so it's still there. It makes it easy to exploit African Americans politically on the ground. Anybody who's in opposition to the state itself could easily, could easily pull that off and cause disruption under African Americans. And so, when it comes to Putin in this regard, it really would not have cost him it wouldn't have cost him a dime to do something like this. But I get it though. I get why he probably wouldn't want to go that far. But he did it for the Haitians, which is why I pointed to that. Visa-free travel from Haiti to Russia was a strong card to play from a foreign policy perspective.
Well, yeah, I was just wondering why you think he didn't want to play that with us here.
Well, I just said, it's the political climate. He doesn't. It's election.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking before. Maybe he is emotional about it. I don't know, but it's interesting. It's interesting thing. I'm hearing it out. The bottom line may not be said on this yet. Because said we still have a lot more protesting to do, man. It seems like this is going to go on for a while. So who knows what further shapes this is going to take internationally, I would say.
Yeah. Hard Fork Rich in the chat says he doesn't care about us here. Haitians and Africans, he has a gain in helping them. What gain does he have in helping Haitians? The Haitians don't have anything to export to Russia. In fact, Haitians import more than they export, and whatever they export, it doesn't go to Russia. Unless you're talking about the gold mines and the copper mines and stuff like that, the Russians don't have a hand in that. If anybody who has a hand in that, that's the Rodham family or Hillary Clinton's brother. That's her brother. He has a hand in that. Hard Fork Rich says strategic location. Strategic location for what? He can't put missiles inside Puerto Plaza. There's nothing you can do.
Hell no.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do about that. Yeah, there will be no Russian ships going to Haiti. It's not going to happen. Not going to happen.
There? No way.
No, that's not going to happen. He'll never be able to get a ship down to Haiti. Maybe a hospital ship or something like that if he wants to do coronavirus testing and stuff like that. Maybe that's the case, but that's not. Russia would never put missiles inside Haiti. If anything, the hurricane will probably take those missiles down before they even get a chance to launch. So, besides that, Russia already has 2 islands outside of Venezuela that's just as close as Haiti is. If they need to use that to launch cruise missiles from there, which the hypersonic missiles can actually hit any part of the U.S. from those 2 islands. They don't need Haiti for that.
Yeah. My brother was just listening and he was like, well, you guys got to talk about the colonialism, that we've had and where Russia was different and how those things come to a head. So he was listening. I thought this was quite interesting. Yeah, he was talking about, American colonialism and and Russia. This is something he just mentioned. So I said I'd bring it up here. Colonialism and Russia, because Russia has never really been a colonialist type of a state. It really hasn't. And how Russia would look at that and relate that to African Americans, the experience there, and how Russia would relate to that. I don't know. Did Putin say anything about colonialism at all? Did he speak on that?
Well, Putin talked about that during the Obama administration. That American colonialism is part of its heritage, right? The colonialist aspect, the white colonialist aspect is part of its heritage. Right. And so he talked about that during the Obama administration. before Obama left office. You know, he kind of just pushed back against Obama for making some kind of snide remarks about Russia. He said Russia wasn't built by African slaves. You need to go deal with that. You know, so I think the colonialist aspect, yeah, Russia has been a soft colonialist power through the Soviet Union. They never really went in there beating people over their heads, you know, that you're only going to speak this language and that's it. You know, in America, or at least from a Western standpoint, colonialism is marked all throughout the hemisphere. It's replaced everything. I mean, if you went to a public school, you'll never know that the Native Americans were even here. I mean, they completely erased them from out the textbooks. Even slavery is being erased out of the textbooks. If you leave it up to Texas, you know, you'll never know that there was any slavery. They'll just tell you it was indentured servitude. Some guys, you know, came on a cruise ship, man, and was looking for work.
They call them. I saw one book, they had to burn it damn near. They tried to say these were immigrants.
Oh, yeah.
Believe it or not, they've been trying to certainly whitewash history for sure. Yeah.
You never know that there were any Native Americans here. I was watching RT one day, and Stacy, which is Max Kaiser's wife, she said she's from Connecticut. She said she didn't know anything about Native Americans until she was in her deep 20s. So she was pretty angry about that, you know. So they had erased it out of the textbooks. Said this whole country was a lie to her. She just had her head was blown. Said, what the hell was this? How come you didn't tell me? I mean, you didn't know that, you know, Mohegan's son had anything to do with Native Americans. I mean, you live in Connecticut.
We have a lot of Indian names in there in Connecticut. It's kind of crazy, but people, yeah. I can see people being that ignorant. Yeah, I can see that. I can definitely see that, especially when it comes to Americans, for sure. But it is shocking to hear that. But unfortunately, I can see it.
Yeah, but you know, that's a part of the issue that Putin's kind of pointed out some time ago, that America hasn't dealt with its colonialist past, and it's still a colonialist power, very hard colonial power too.
Yeah, I think that's my brother that's what he was, you know, speaking about, the colonialist aspect, and that's something that you know that Russia's going to look at the United States with, and yeah, we're talking about that, right, Benny?
Yeah. Colonialism is still is the only way that the America can survive, because that's what it was built off of.
Yep.
It has no other way to go.
Yeah.
All right, let me make sure that nobody else is trying to get in. All right, man. We'll just close out because that's the last item on the docket, and you know, hit the like button if you have not already done so, and share the video if possible, and hit the notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust. Those posted on the community tab. Shalom, everyone.